we got in his car, and we started driving, and we came to a light that was red, and we stopped. And when we got to that light that was red where we stopped, the conversation continued until you heard this familiar sound that has become the heartbeat of our life now together in this generation, and that is that little ding. And that meant that there was a text message. And so two things happened simultaneously when that ding happened on his phone, all right? The first thing was he turned to look to see if the president was calling. It was very important. Even though what we were talking about was pretty rich and good, he checked out on me and he started checking his phone. But at the same time, he mashed the gas and we went right through a red light, to my great horror. Now I lived to tell about it, and that's why I'm here today to tell you this story. But it really got me to thinking about how powerful these little tools have become, these little text messages back and forth between us, and it's something that we just can't resist, isn't it? I mean, you know, the little ding, and all of a sudden it's like, it might be important, you know, you're sweating profusely as you're trying not to embarrass the person that you're there with, and so what do we do when that happens? You know, we're very cool. We just kind of go, oh, you know, excuse me just a moment. I don't want anything to interrupt our time together, and so I'll just turn this off. But what are we really doing? We're checking it, right? We're checking it out. Because you never know. The senator, the governor, the president might be intervening and calling us. And so it's so important that we check that little ding and find out if, in fact, when I probably said that, you probably looked at your phone to make sure that wasn't, because I'm so close to the real sound, right? We are just kind of like magnetically drawn to these texts between one another. And it's gotten to a point where it's really dangerous in our society, isn't it? That people are so driven by this. And you have, this has happened to you, it's happened to me. Michelle and I were driving, 4 or 5 months ago. We got up beside these two guys on a truck. They were obviously lost, and they were trying to find their friend's house, and they're on a main road. And this guy was paying no attention. He was totally and he was the one driving, and he was totally like back and forth, I can't find it or whatever. And I honked my horn, which awoke him to the fact that he was paying no attention to what was going on. All of us have seen this and become such a powerful tool and such a deal in our generation that it's just amazing how much it gets our attention, right? And so I was thinking about, when I was thinking about this time together, I was thinking about what I learned in college, and you probably did too, about Pavlov's experiment. Do you remember that? And that was, where he had trained his dogs that he rings a bell and they get fed. And as a result of that, what they found out through that experiment was that not only did these dogs, start searching, go look for the food where it was supposed to be when he rang the bell, but they even started the salivating process earlier. Like they were starting to get the digestive things ready, because they were anticipating that there was going to be food right around the corner, right? And what many people didn't know about that experiment was Pavlov really was not trying to prove anything amazing. He just wanted to make sure that if he was out of town, that his dogs would get fed. Who would ding, ding, and they would all come and eat, right? No. It reminded me of that, how we are attracted to text messages and how they really drive our particular generation right now. Now, some of you may predate this ding generation, and you may remember something like this that used to happen. And so, raise of hands after I say this, if you remember this experience for your life growing up. You're at the family dinner table, the phone rings, and your dad or your mom, usually it was the dad, would say something like, "Let it go. If it's important, they'll call back," right? You remember that? Lawrence and I were talking the other day about people do not understand the complexity of the rotary dial. There was no way this was going to happen fast, right? Especially if they had 9s in their number. Okay? Just took forever to call them. Why don't you get some 1s in your number, please? All right? And some of you, raise of hands, if you remember maybe a generation later or so, you might remember this experience where the phone rings, you're all at the dinner table, and dad or mom says, let it go, the answering machine will get it, right? So what has happened? What's happened to us? How has this risen to such an important level? How is it that we are so drawn to seeing each other's texts, but maybe not so much to seeing the text that's come from God for us? The written text. Now here's something that we do, and maybe you haven't thought about this. This is something we say, and I'm intrigued by this too. We do not ask each other if you read my text, right? What do we say? Did you get my text, right? Because there's an assumption that if you got it, you must have read it, right? So there's just a natural built-in assumption that if you got it, you must have read it. Here's something you're never going to hear, and I haven't heard, and you haven't heard, and that's it. I got your text, but I'm really not much of a reader. As I opened it up, there was a whole bunch of consonants and vowels, and it looked complicated. I didn't even try to dive into it because it was going this way, and I didn't know if it was right to left to right. I had no idea. And it was long, and so I'm not much of a reader. And yet, as a pastor over my life, what I have heard about God's text is filled with consonants and vowels. So complicated. I just don't know if I don't even know where to start. And it said thee, and it said thou, and other things, and I was just so puzzled. I couldn't begin. And that seems to be the way that we treat God's word, isn't it? And yet, if we would be honest about it, the texts that come from God are so life-changing that many of us who are here today would admit that had we read God's text for our lives sooner, we would have had better marriages. Had we read God's text for our lives, our finances would be better. Had we read God's text for our lives, the family might be more unified together. Had we read God's text for our lives, it probably would have changed what we value in life and would have probably given us a better result than what we have received. If we're truly honest about God's text for our lives. David said, "Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all day long." Now, what you may not know about this is David was writing these words about books that were written hundreds of years before he arrived on the planet. And you may have heard, and I certainly as a pastor, that's an old-fashioned book, and it just doesn't apply to my life today. Well, David found an old bunch of books that really applied to his life in that day. And what you may not know as well is that David was talking about probably only about 7 of the books that we enjoy today that are compiled together today to form the Bible. He was talking about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges. When he said, "Oh, how I love your law. I think about it all day long." Can I ask you a question? What do you think about all day long? Would your life be different if you included God's text for your life into your daily habit? Would it make you think differently? What do we think about all day long? Do we think about the person who cut us off in traffic and how we're going to get them back? Do we think about the hot girl or the hot guy we ran into at Starbucks? Do we think about payday and what we're going to buy when we get that check in our hands? What do we think about all day long? And would it change if we read God's text for our lives? David went on to say, "You, through your commandments, make me wiser than my enemies." David's saying something here that is so important for us to understand. God, by reading your text, I kind of got a pre-warning as to what the enemy was going to be doing. I took a left as you were guiding me instead of a right into the trap that he was laying for me. And now I am on the path that you're leading. I'm in the direction that you want to take me. You've made me smarter than my enemies. Instead of answering my enemies with a comeback that I had thought through and I'm going to really just deck them, I answered them according to your word with love, and I showed them that I cared about their life, and the result was it changed the environment of the room, and it changed the opportunity for me at my work. David said, "For they are ever with me." Your text helps me make daily decisions, moment by moment. As I have read your text for today, God, it has spilled into my life in a way that it's helping me to make moment by moment decisions, day by day decisions for my life. I have more understanding than my teachers. For your testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients because I keep your precepts. Your text messages has helped reset my values for my life. It has increased my wisdom to the point where when I am speaking, teachers are amazed that I'm speaking your text and your wisdoms into my life. And they're saying, "Where did you hear that?" And I said, "It's the text I got today from God." And they are astounded and they are amazed. And even those who are older and have been through a lot of life are really amazed that at my young age I have a grasp of things that took them 20, 30 years to get a hold of. And I know it now because you text messaged me. I received it, read it, and am acting upon what you texted me, God. And there are elders around me who are amazed that I can do this and understand this when I'm in my teens and my 20s and my early 30s. Because it wasn't until they were in their 60s that they really looked back and saw regrets and wished they had made other decisions. Thank you, God, for your text into my life. Because I keep your precepts, I have restrained my feet from evil ways. Your texts, God, have added value to my life and keep me from moving into destruction. They prevent me from going in a direction that would be evil. And even when I think I'm doing a good thing, they bring me back into check. They call my attention back to my own heart, which Jeremiah said could be really deceptive, and sometimes it has deceived me. It feels like that I'm going to be doing a good thing, but when I think about it, I'm doing a good thing to get a hook in someone so they'll do something for me. And God, I don't want that to happen. And your text message straightened that out, and now I am no longer moving in an evil direction that's going to hurt people and damage people. I'm doing what you called me to do sacrificially. I understand what love really is all about. It isn't all about me getting what I want and my expressions and my feelings are being stirred and I get out of that experience what I want. But God, I'm giving away at a cost to me, and that's what love really is all about. Thank you for your text message into my life. Through your precepts, I get understanding. Therefore, I hate every false way. At one point, God spoke to a prophet named Amos, and he told him that he should stand in the gates of the city and help the people understand the difference. This is God's text to Amos. Stand in the gates of the city and declare what is right and declare what is wrong, so that the people might hate evil and love good. You see, we're living in a generation always that doesn't understand the difference between good and evil. And God needs us to get his text and stand in the gates of our cities and declare what is good and what is evil. And David is further saying here, that we're always wanting to know the why. The why is the big question for us when God asks us to do something that's sacrificial, when God asks us to do something that might be a little harder than what we're wanting to do. When God invites us into a circumstance that is challenging to our lives, we always want to know why. We're still that child, huh? When you told them, make your bed. Why? I'm just going to sleep in it again, and it's going to get all messed up. And so we as parents, okay, let me explain this to you. We're frustrated. In fact, we give up and we're like, I don't care, about your why. Just please make your bed. And after you make your bed, then you will understand what I'm talking about, right? And David said, I understand that. I understand, God, that obeying you is what I need to do, and understanding will follow. To understand, and here's our sticky statement for the day, all right? To understand the why, submit and apply God's text to your life. To understand the why, submit and apply. There are things that God is texting for us to do that we are not going to know the why until we obey him and we submit to his will over our lives. And then we will be, that makes sense. Well, the first time you came home with your friends and they wanted to go see your bedroom and your bed was made and everything was put away, then you understood the why. That mom had you make your bed and you could invite everybody in and it didn't look like a rat's nest and there were places to sit and it was really cool, right? And see, this happens with us with God when we obey him and we do what he asks us to do. Often clarity will come. And David finishes out by saying, Lord, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. My daily decisions, God, are dependent upon the text that come from you. They illuminate my pathway. They are a light. They tell me how I can go and how I should follow you. They give me next steps. And so, God, I delight and I love your text for my life. They clarify and they illuminate the way. They dispense with darkness. It is very easy for me to see the good and that is evil. And God, it's so clear when I accept your text for my life, when I read them and I begin to act upon your text. Have you been reading God's text for your life? At the conclusion of the service, we're going to invite those of you who don't have a Bible, or maybe the one you have right now is been passed down as a family Bible, and it's so heavy that you dare not pick it up. Or maybe it's grandmother's and it's so fragile that you're careful about turning the page. And so you would like to have one for you. One where you can begin to read God's text for your life. Jake is going to be at that table. It's going to be right on my right-hand side at the back. He's going to be waiting for you. We're going to be talking about next steps. Get a Bible in your hand and what's coming up. We're going to help you to navigate through God's text, understand what it is for you and how to read God's text and apply it to your life. And there are 3 steps really that we're going to be taking together as we begin to explore God's Word. And these 3 things are the application of what I want you to do and begin this week, all right? Step number 1 is called the step of observation. When you open God's text for your life and you begin to read it and you look at it, observe what's going on. Observation is about, what does this passage say? Now sometimes if we just jump in the middle of something, we need to read a few verses before, a few verses after to get the whole story. But our observation is just going to be, what is this passage saying? If you're still not clear, there's a lot of helps. You know, we have, through the internet, a lot of things that I had to go purchase at the Bible bookstore that are readily available to you to help you understand and manners and customs of the day and why this was so important. There's language used in the Bible sometimes that, you know, in our generation, we're not farming, right? And so a sower went out to sow. What does that mean? Well, he had seed in a bag, and that sowing meant that he was putting that seed down into the ground. And so as we understand, as we observe and see what's going on, that first step, we get an idea what the passages say. The second step is called interpretation. What does that passage mean? That's digging a little deeper, trying to figure out what it really meant. A lot of times to the original audience that was there. What did it mean to them? I can remember we went to Romania, one of our early trips there, and they were farmers in the area where we were ministering. And so as we started service, it was just the kids because the sun was still up. And as the sun began to set, the farmers are coming out of the field, moms and dads. And so they came and joined us for the service. And as we ministered and talked about passages from the scripture that were about farming, they really understood that. They connected with it immediately. And they knew exactly what that meant. And they understood what it meant to be in the fields and hard labor. And so that second step is, what does the passage mean? The third step then is application. What am I going to do about what this passage says and what it means? And these are steps for us in application. First of all, how does that truth revealed here affect our relationship with God? Secondly, how does that truth affect my relationship with the people around me? Third, how does this truth affect me personally? And then finally, how does this truth affect my responsibility or my responses to the enemy, Satan? When he comes and attacks me, what does this text say to me that's going to help me to resist the enemy? These three steps are going to be life-changing for you, and these are things we want to help you do. And so when we close the service in a few moments, I'm going to invite you to meet with Jake over here and get some next steps. Get a Bible in your hand. We're going to start taking in God's text for our lives. Ding! Text from God. And it's more important than what's in your pocket and what's in your purse, what's sitting beside you right now. It is coming from the throne of God to you, personally, to you. I'm going to invite our worship team to come, and I want to say 4 things happen when I ignore God's text for my life. 4 things happen to me when I ignore God's text for my life. The first thing is I magnify the weaknesses of everybody else. I can tell when I haven't been reading God's text because I get super critical about other people. I start noticing everything that I wouldn't maybe normally notice, because when God's texts come to my life, they really challenge me about me. And I'm so busy with me, I don't have much time to think about you. But if I am not reading God's text, what I notice is that it magnifies the weaknesses of the people around me. This is one of the reasons why I want you reading God's text. I do not want God to magnify my weaknesses to you, okay? So start reading. The second thing that happens is that I tend to look at my life on earth as all that there is, and I don't think from an eternal perspective. And boy, does that have an effect on so much of my life. When I am just thinking about this moment, the gusto of life and everything that I need to get and have and receive here, it really affects the way I live with other people and the decisions that I'm making and the way I handle a lot of things about my life when I'm not thinking more eternally. But when I'm thinking more eternally, you know, there is a real rest and a peace that comes about how I'm living life. As I'm functioning and praying in and obeying God and doing what God calls me to do, and I am looking into eternity and thinking about the wonder of what is coming and what God's bringing. Man, there's hope that's instilled inside of me, even when the world looks like it's kind of just crumbling down, and culture is destroying some of the values that I cherish. When I am living with an eternal perspective, I know the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is still in charge. The heavens are his throne, and the earth is his footstool. Right? The third thing that tends to happen for me is when I am not reading God's text for my life, I tend to close my hands and cling to my possessions. And I live really kind of selfishly. I'm holding on to everything. And what I find is things are slipping away faster than I ever dreamed because I'm holding on to them so tightly, and the bottom line is not being met. But when I get God's text in my life and I let loose of those things, and I recognize I'm just a steward, I don't own anything in this world, that suddenly things that I need are coming out of everywhere. And God's sustaining me and encouraging me. And finally, whenever I'm not reading God's text for my life, I hold on to my anger and I ignore God's text. I don't want to listen to what he has to say. I'm holding on to my anger, my right to be upset, my right not to forgive, my right to be wounded, my right to be hurt. I'm clinging to that and holding to that when I don't invite God's text into my life on a regular basis. But when I do, I'm washed over with a fresh look at me again and a fresh look at him and how much he loves me and how much he cares about me. Ding! There's a text for you. It's from God, and he wants you to read it. Will you stand with me? Let's worship, and I want to come back and pray with you.